about, it's important for you to know which agencies have a need for your product or service. You can go to FedBizOps or USAspending.gov. Have you identified which agencies need your product or services? Who needs them?
I mean, I looked over the past, like the archive list all the way back to 2010, and then I even went on the USA Spending and saw how much was used toward that, and it's not like specified in a lot of our
So are the NAICS codes really big and yours is like one small piece of it?
sometimes.
Okay. What other issues have you found?
DOD, DOJ, Forest Service, Parks people, or Army Corps, that sort of thing.
Good. Who's buying your stuff? Who's buying your stuff?
It's mostly mining industry.
We'll trip out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When you were asking if, like, when we looked on FedBizOps and USA Spending, which
Yeah.
could, I saw a lot of, like, anything steel, was being got, like, Army, the Air Force, I saw some from two of the NAICS codes that we were using, so.
Okay. So sometimes, like at this stage, you may think about looking at other NAICS codes if they're not buying a whole lot in your product or service area. What did you find when you looked at your NAICS codes?
DOD, Navy,
Mhm.
there's a lot of them.
Okay. Good. What did you guys find for cleaning supplies?
Department of Defense is big, between,
Through DLA, or who was buying it?
well, let me jump to something real quick. DLA was making some of the purchases, Department of Army with, degreasing, I believe it was for, like, refurbishing military equipment. But, the other one was, Department of Homeland Security, treating water, another option. And then Department of Justice was another option. And cleaning supplies for prison.
Good. Okay. It's also important to know whether or not your product or service as is meets the government requirements. So we're going to so here are your options. Your product or service today meets the government's requirements exactly as it is. If the answer is yes, you can submit a proposal to the agency with your product or service as is, right? If this is the requirement and yours meets it exactly, you can submit a proposal. If the answer is no, it doesn't meet, you can either decide to tweak the way you offer your product or service. So that's you physically making a change to the way you offer your product or service. So what are the pros and cons of doing that? You physically changing the way you do business.
Well, it may require new capital, new equipment, for example. You know, if you need to machine something a little differently than you have to meet that requirement, it could cost you money that you're not guaranteed necessarily to win the contract.
Exactly, and if you have a situation like you just described where, you know, it's been years since the government's actually purchased that item, then maybe it's not worth your investment. But if you looked at FedBizOps or USAspending.gov, you see that there have been a lot of contracts for this, and there's a lot more future contracts, and federal is really where you want to be, then you might decide to take that risk, you know, for a better return on investment and do that. So that's your choice. Another, if it's still no, meaning you don't meet the product or service requirements, you can decide to bring in subcontractors to help you perform the requirements. So let's say, for example, you offer a solution and the government says, not only do we want the solution, but we want training. And you don't do training. You could decide to subcontract to a training organization to bring them in to help you together meet the requirements. So that's another company helping you meet the requirements, and that's a decision that you can make. So what happens? Either you can prime the deal, and they can be a subcontractor to you, or you can subcontract to them if they're interested in going after it. Sorry. United States is calling me, just in case. If not, you can decide to work as a subcontractor to help you perform the contract. So in other words, if it's too risky for you to do it by yourself, or the requirement, sometimes they're buying way more widgets than you have the capacity to produce. In which case, you may want to contact one of your competitors and see if they want to go after it with you. Now, of course, you run the risk of, them deciding to do it all themselves, but, federal contracting makes strange bedfellows. Sometimes people are partners together, sometimes they're competitors. And, you guys have been in these businesses for a long time. There's some trust relationships established, perhaps, with companies you can work with. So how did you, when you looked at section C of your RFPs, how did your product or service compare to what they need, what they're asking for?
With the product that we would be able to produce, it's very specific as to what they're asking for, but they're literally not send out a blueprint, send us what we want, but
And you would design to that?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So you wouldn't really have to change anything, because you're just, okay, good.
Some of the ones I found didn't have a section C.
What did they have?
It's just like,
Just the requirements listed?
they have, like, the front page, the solicitation order for commercial items, and then, like, section SF, it's got just like proposal instructions, and then the scope of work.
Yeah, so,
It's labeled like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6.
you always have people that break the rules, right? So, anytime you see the letters SF together, usually there's a number that's with it, and that just means standard form. So if you see an SF and a number, you should have it right there in the RFP. They should make it available to you. If not, you can just Google the standard form number and it'll pop up for you.
Yeah, it says SF 1449 continuation sheet, but like it doesn't have the first one to continue on, but
This is when RFPs get written by committee. So if I were you, I wouldn't get, all agencies should be using the standard contract format, the A through M. Either when you look at your RFP documents, see if it follows that. If it doesn't, just make sure the information that is contained in A through M, that you have, that they've provided that to you. So if they've called it sections, like in your case, they said that one of the sections was called statement of work?
yeah, proposal instructions, scope of work.
Yeah, so scope of work would have been like section C, proposal instructions would have been section L. Okay. And how about your products or services? Do they meet the government requirements as is?
And there's also avenues to tailor what your company does to fit new products as well. So, but yes, we do meet.
So tell me what you just said again?
So there's, yes, we do meet products, but based on my limited understanding of what Blue Oak does, there's also opportunities for additional products that can be made, that we don't currently
Oh, that you could
specialize in.
that you could make new.
Right, so there's room for growth.
Good, perfect. So that's the thing to look for. So when you do your SWOT analysis, think about that. They're asking for this. Is there something else that you can provide and maybe move into another NAICS code that doesn't require all that additional work or effort? Okay, so here are your choices. A government RFP comes out and there's only one product or service and you meet it and it's only you. It's all you. So that's the top. I'm sorry, we're talking about from the government's perspective. So the government comes out and they say, I want cleaning supplies. So it's just one product or service and that's all they ask for. Or they could say, I want cleaning services, I want the cleaning product, but I want somebody to clean bathrooms, for example. Or I want, not only do I want cleaning supplies, but I want to be able to have all the paint prep products. So in this case, if they were just asking cleaning supplies, you guys could provide it just as is. In this case, you would have to provide your product or service, your cleaning supplies, with the restroom maintenance and with the outside product of the painting prep. So when you look at a government RFP, that's the decision you're making. What is it that you are going to be able to do, and where do you need to get in outside products or vendors? In this case, you would be the prime contractor, and in this case, you would have to decide whether you wanted to be prime or sub. Because in this scenario, depending on how big each of these are, like if this outside services thing was really this big and there was a company that did that but didn't provide cleaning supplies, you might say, hey, do you know about this particular procurement? Why don't you prime it and we'll subcontract to you? Or if the cleaning supply piece was this big and there was only a little bit for these other ones, you might decide to prime it and bring in subcontractors to do the other pieces. So when you're thinking about solutioning, your problem could exist in any one of these places, right? Your own product or service could not meet the requirements, and that would be the same problem here, or you could have a problem with trying to find outside services or outside product providers. So when you're thinking about solution, you have to provide a solution to this entire continuum, whether it's just your product or whether it's your product plus outside services. So that's how you need to think. You need to think about the solution as being the whole piece. So here are your choices. If there's issues with your specific product or service, you can decide if you want to change your commercial offering. And what that means is you've got this whole catalog. Let's say, for example, I keep picking on you guys, but let's say, for example, there is an element of your cleaning supply. Can you tell me one of the ingredients?
Sodium hydroxide.
Okay, so let's say the government said, we're happy to entertain any cleaning products that don't include sodium hydroxide. So you could decide that you want to take sodium hydroxide out of your product and replace it with something else that makes you compliant with the government. And you could decide that that's a big change or a little change, and whether or not you get the return on investment to do that. You could also decide, I'm going to keep my existing product line with sodium hydroxide in it, but I'm going to have a separate product line for just government that doesn't have sodium hydroxide, that has another ingredient in there. So at that point, you're managing two sets of inventory, two sets of numbers, two sets of pricing, and it becomes, more cumbersome for you guys to do that. And companies do it all the time. You just need to decide whether or not that's something you want to do. Your other alternative is to, let's say that contract came out of DHS. You could say, I'm going to turn down this opportunity with DHS because I know DOD buys it all the time with that ingredient in it. So I'm just going to sell to DOD. So you can make those kind of strategic decisions. The second one has to go back to this breadth. The first issue dealt with just your product or service. The other thing you could have is a breadth of contract. So the government wants not only what you provide, but other stuff. And the government tends to lean towards this method of buying other stuff because it's much better to make a contractor a prime contractor because then they only have one belly button to press. But if they order, if you go back to this scenario and it's like 5 different vendors, then they would have, all this extra resourcing to do. And their thought process, which makes absolutely no sense, is when they're evaluating proposals, if they're managing one contractor, they assume that to be about $500 a year to manage one contractor. So if they're doing a situation where they're managing 5 contractors because they've decided to buy things separately rather than bundling it all together, the example we keep using in the classroom, then that's 500 times 5 different contractors. So it's a $2,500 expense to them versus a $500 expense to them. I don't see how $500 makes no sense to me whatsoever, but that's what they think. So that's one of the issues they have to. So you have to decide whether you're going to subcontract those deals or whether you're going to prime them. Do all of you know of other companies in the area or that you've worked with before who do federal contracting today? It's just an unknown beast, isn't it?
I not in the area.
Yeah, okay.
Why don't they allow more exposure, for even just for FedBizOp, for FBA.gov? I mean, why is it that I'd never heard of it until I got here and what, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like they almost want it to be the best kept secret, but then they also want products and services. So,
I mean, I know that there are many, many small businesses who have done well by the government. I'm one of them. You know, it is a lucrative marketplace. But I also know some small businesses who haven't gotten any traction whatsoever. And I wonder sometimes if they, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, like when we say, you need diversity in your workforce. Everybody nods their head, yes, we need diversity in the workforce. But if I say to you, how many women are on your board of directors? How many African Americans? How many people, how many Muslims? You know, all of a sudden the numbers drop quite a bit because we say we want diversity, right? Because it's the politically correct thing to say, but do we actually implement it?
it's not always even viable. Like, I mean, sometimes it's hard to find people without a rap sheet that can pass a drug test, much less are we going to have 6 women on the board, and, you know what I mean? So,
Women in that area have a problem with drugs and rap sheets, or is that what you're saying?
you never earn benefits. Yeah.
But do you see the issue, you know, like I know the government. Are we good?
It's also a fax number, don't they, as
Okay.
this shit.
Um,
Ignore it.
So the government has the same issue, right? They have to say that there's lip service being paid to small businesses. And literally, the small business goals keep rising over the years. So, you know, they are putting their money where their mouth is. But on the same token, remember the example I gave you when I went to that small business development center thing in my own library? There were 75 companies there, and that was one meeting, 1 month. And they do those meetings every month. There are a lot of small businesses out there. So the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you, you know, and literally, the hardest contract you will ever have to get will be the first one. And then once you get in there and you start having your past performance and you're able to vertically sell and horizontally sell, so vertically sell meaning sell other products and services that you offer to the same customer, horizontally sell, take that same solution you came up with one, you know, Department of Justice and sell it to Homeland Security and sell it over here. You know, you're able to do that, but it's difficult to get the first one. So, you know, my suggestion is you try to put as many irons in the fire as possible. You know, the fact is that you came to this class and now you know about USA spending and you know about these things. And now, you know, and I suggest that you contact the small business advocates in these various agencies and start getting relationship with them. You know, I would call the prime contractors. You know, none of you have relationships with them right now, but call major companies and say, I provide cleaning supply services. Do you need that for your own company? Or are you going after anything that, if you've seen the, I wouldn't say are you going after, because nobody will answer that question for you, but if you go to USA Spending and you see that Lockheed happens to do a lot of facilities management contracts, and your cleaning supplies are something that they buy for those, you know, that's where you make the relationships. But it's a lot of work to get those first contracts. I'm not, you know, I don't want to paint a too rosy a picture, you know, so.
Would it be beneficial, and I'm thinking that it would be, but maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, since there's going to be some folks down this direction, but General Dynamics is a prime, they're right up the road, and I could probably most likely get their procurement person here, just to kind of talk to.
Sure.
When we did an event like this, I guess it's been over a year ago, they were there, Volvo showed up, so, and several of those from General Dynamics are going to be at an event that we're hosting tomorrow at the Higher Ed Center on creating a Kaizen culture.
Creating what?
Kaizen culture. And so they're going to be down here anyway. So I could say, hey, y'all just need to come early and visit us. But I also don't want to interrupt your flow.
No,
but
I
if
would
it
love
be
that. I think that would be
beneficial,
great, sure.
I will work on that.
Yeah, no matter when you can get them, and even if it's not these 3 days,
Right.
but the next, whatever
Okay.
works, I'm happy to do that. And if you want to bring in, you know, a couple different ones, whoever
Okay.
you have relationships with, because I think getting them tied into people
Yeah.
who can, are actually making money. Would you all, I'm speaking for you, would that be helpful to you?